Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, directly outside the city of Little Port-au-Prince, Ohio, formerly known as Springfield, Ohio. Now, folks, I will be your pilot and navigator for tonight's shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And joining me here tonight to answer the question of what is the process, that is the topic of conversation tonight, is Dana from Rotting Jewels, and Process Church researcher and YouTuber. Welcome, Dana, and thanks for joining me to get a little GCD here this evening.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We've had numerous conversations on the Process Church, on the Occult Rejects, so this is not our first conversation. It'll be more or less a continuation of some of those discussions.
Yeah, well, it's the process. People are everywhere. According to Ed Sanders, I would say that he's right.
So is that in studying Ed Sanders' archives, I would agree with you on that. First and foremost, ma'am, I'd agree with you on that assessment. And this is a tweet you sent out back in August from a note from the Ed Sanders archives where Ed writes, "The process people are everywhere." I agree. So it sounds like you also find agreement in that statement from Ed. And what do you think? What do you think Ed meant by that? Because this is a note he wrote contemporary to his research into the family, correct?
I think that this was after the original publication of the family, but I think that at this point he was probably completely losing his mind. I think that when you look through Ed's archive, you see his paranoia grow a lot deeper, and I think that part of that is due to some Scientologists and Processians gang stalking him, basically.
Sure, and that was pretty apparent in some of his notes, right? In his archives he's got at Princeton. He seemed to really take catalog a lot of that kind of gang stalking and harassment he was receiving, including, if I'm not mistaken, they were even visiting his bookstore when he moved out of the city and went up to Woodstock, New York.
The process was, and also I think a longer game was Leland Cole and Paul Krasner kind of doing that like back and forth game of, he's working for Scientology, he's working for Scientology, he's working for the process, he's working for the CIA. Like they were doing that to him for, according to Ed's notes, decades.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah. Paul Krasner's an interesting character in this whole narrative, and I was just actually discussing one of Krasner's close friends and a fan of Krasner's work earlier this evening with Ryder Lee in regard to his Kubrick documentary. He just did the Shining, Clockwork Shining, combination of kind of an effort of analyzing a number of Kubrick's films in the light of MK Ultra and cult capacities. They mention a lot of process related stuff in there, and Sirhan, and specifically in Manson, of course. But yeah, Kubrick and Paul Krasner were very close friends.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, he was a fan of he reached out to he apparently subscribed to Krasner's Realist. It's, dating back to I think as early as the late 1950s.
I mean, that doesn't really surprise me because it seems like the Realist was a relatively, even though it was kind of underground, it was still a pretty prominent publication. But I think that that's really interesting considering, ties, like Scientology ties and some of these Kubrick movies and some of the, process imagery. And, was Paul Krasner tied up with Scientology or was he tied up with the process? There's really no difference to me and to, I know you, and to people that understand what the process is and that it is the same as Scientology, but some people can't make that delineation. So it makes it difficult to have those conversations.
No, absolutely. They definitely are synonymous. It should be considered, I think, by more folks, especially in discussing these matters as a synonymous to one another, the same organization. It's funny you mentioned that because with Krasner, I'm actually in the same regard. I consider the same questions surrounding Kubrick. Was he Scientologist? Was he part of the process? He's kind of steeped in both of those communities, including of which his daughter was a Scientologist.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so weird. I don't know. Is there that sort of sect of, either protected Scientologists or, quote unquote elite Scientologists that are allowed to, operate under the process and it just not be known? They're not listed as
Sure.
Scientologists because the process doesn't have, course listings. They don't have the Auditor magazine, these other magazines, the Freedom magazine out there. So is that a way for these certain individuals to kind of get away with it? I don't know.
It's a good proposition you pose though, because Kubrick would definitely, I think, qualify for that kind of elite status. I mean, it may in fact be what he's. I know a lot of folks have interpreted Eyes Wide Shut in so many different manners and whatnot, but I mean, there's a lot of that story that seems autobiographical to Kubrick, whereas I believe that apartment that in the West Village there, or in the village of Manhattan, where Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman live in the film, their characters, I believe that's modeled after Kubrick's own apartment in the West Village or Village. So I think there's a lot of autobiographical stuff in that, and dealing with these kind of elite, pedophile sex cults, if you will, whatnot. I mean, that is the context in which Tom Cruise operates in that film. His character does. So I do find some of that very interesting relative because, a couple years ago, I've been looking at the process for, I don't know, probably 14 years. 14 years ago, no one was talking about the process. There's essentially two people on the interwebs talking about the process. Adam Go Rightly, who's done some, I appreciate his Manson book for sure. I like that, and some of his other work as well. And Ed Opperman. Outside of those two parties, there wasn't much discussion, if any, on relative to the Manson process situation or otherwise. So, I just find it, it's interesting that some of these concepts are still coming out today, right? Like no one's still talking about some of these elements. Like I never would have thought Kubrick then had anything to do with Scientology or the process, right? But given the information I know today, I seriously asked that question, right? And I also asked the question of why is it 2024 and we're just now kind of coming to these, having these discussions, on these topics with these people when it seems so obvious, right? Be it Paul Krasner. I mean, it was so obvious to Ed, right? And some of Ed's stuff that Krasner, they're like, Krasner was suspect, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, Krasner knew Ed all the way back in the 60s when the process
Sure.
showed up, to meet Ed. So it's like this decades long interaction and, I would say relationship that eventually just turned into an acquaintanceship. Yeah, Flopperman or Cy
I don't know. Yeah,
Opperman.
I laughed. I don't know. I don't know.
I've heard. I've
Yeah,
heard.
allegedly. I don't know if we
Allegedly.
can say. Yeah,
I cannot confirm or deny. You said it though. I don't know. I mean, I feel like some people don't I feel like some people get weird about Scientology or the process because they feel like they're not going to be taken seriously, but it's where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, how many times do you have to see something over and over again, and how many connections does there have to be? I mean, Echo Cat had recently sent me this book. I can't remember what it's called, but Whitley Strieber allegedly
Oh,
talked about spending time with the process in Rome. He lost like a 2-week period of time. And apparently he's in Rome banging some Processian, doesn't remember what happened. And he does this like under this weird, like hypnotic spell. And like he's basically like regurgitating all of this under this, whatever hypnosis, whatever you want to call it. And also Peter Levenda was with the process at the exact same time in Rome. So
well,
it's
that doesn't shock me.
like, why don't people, take those stories or those narratives seriously when it's coming out of these people's own mouths?
Exactly. They like to brag about it, don't they?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, that's just a story. And it's like they're literally
Right.
it themselves.
Well, and that's a good. Those are some good relative examples of the process people are indeed everywhere. But on that same note, and of the same thing about folks bragging, it seems like there's not a, I mean, this continued, and probably thanks to the Netflix documentary, but the continued narrative that I'm getting jammed up just trying to explain, but the continued narrative that the Process Church ended in 1974, which I can't even say with a straight face. You know what I mean? But it is the continued narrative. I mean, message boards, comments on Twixter, social media, like everything, Reddit. You know, there's not a forum that I don't see this. You know, I've even seen it in comment sections on some of our shows that we've done on the process in the past on podcasts here. I've had those statements made to me. I know you have as well. What are you talking about? The process ended in 1974, and not only is that like just the most wildly inaccurate claim based upon just the small amount of evidence available. I think if there was more availability to like some of these stuff from the Ed Sanders archive relative to the actual corporate documents, that that would dispel that claim altogether, because I think that was pretty eye-opening to me, was seeing some of that stuff from the original corporate filings, which I think, and after analyzing that and looking at, you and I were recently discussing in a offline Process Church discussion here that we frequently communicate with or on, regarding when did the process, on the topic, what is the process? Also, when did the process get places, right? Like, the corporate documents obviously describes kind of what is the process, because it's not, as the corporate documents say, it's nothing like what's been really publicly, told about the process, especially within the logistical aspects of their operation and in their corporate structure. It's very bizarre, and we can look at some of that here. But my point being is, like, after looking at some of the dates, I have even more questions about what is the process, because they originally, as you know, and you've covered there on your channel, I know as well, going into some of these details as far as the exact incorporation dates, but those documents, from Sanders' show, it was specifically in June of '68 in Louisiana. However, if you look up the Best Friends, Society, because again, they didn't change their corporate identity, they just changed the name on the sign. And you look that up out of Utah, and they claim to be a domestic corporation in the state of Utah since 1968, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. Because if they incorporated in Louisiana, which the documents do show, that would be a foreign corporation in the state of Utah. So I'm to the point now where I wonder, did they incorporate in Utah at the very same time?
I don't think that they did. And here's why, because I will double check my records, because I had to pay for the documents out of Utah. Sure. And I think I ended up spending, like, I don't know, it was like $12, but I just wanted everything because I figured it was worth it, because that was like when I was, first looking into the Best Friends angle. When you look up, like, in the state of Louisiana in the online registry, it just shows that rotation to Best Friends, but
Right.
It's not, it doesn't show that it's the chapter versus in Utah. You know what? Like,
Right.
see, like, you have all the name changes and stuff like that. But
and this one says that it changed on, it doesn't say, actually. It says Foundation of Faith in 93, actually, on this one.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like there's just a huge shell game with a lot of this stuff.
Yes,
And
that's my point.
I don't think
Absolutely.
that they were there. I don't believe that they were in Utah. I don't see any evidence to support it yet. It doesn't mean that it's not the case. It's just, we know that they were in New Orleans, obviously. We know that they were in New York, and we know that they were in California at a bare minimum. I think that there's a stronger argument that they were a part of the Children. And so I think that the Westchester faction of the process is the Children. I think that that's the old guard of the Children, and some of these people are at Best Friends today. So I think that that is a better argument. I don't have anything, though, for Utah yet.
No, but you make some good points, especially about the epicenter of activity surrounding good old Westchester County, New York. I definitely want to discuss some of that, so I'd like to table that for a moment, if you will, ma'am.
Yeah.
Because I think you're spot on with with these filings, and to speak to kind of the spook aspects of these activities. This is a shell game with all this, right? So, like, here in Louisiana, for example, they originally incorporated in 6/21/1968, and again, that is what the records show from the handwritten, printed out, with the Xerox copies and the printouts and signatures from the original filing that Ed had on file. And they for some reason they didn't dissolve it. They just apparently just didn't act, and dissolved itself in 2011 here in Louisiana. But it is odd because there's not a clear delineation here of when they changed their names, right? It seems that they changed their name. Well, is this saying from the Foundation of Faith to the Best Friends Animal Society in 93? That is accurate. It did occur in 93, so that seems accurate at least. I just find it odd when you look at again, this Utah filing. And again, there's so much funky stuff going on with the Utah stuff. And I guess my point being is just the spooky nature of these activities. You know, people wonder why I think if folks want to wonder why, there's message boards that say the process ended in 74. There's Netflix documentaries that say that, you know, et cetera. There's podcasts that say that. Well, it's because of the spooky nature of these activities, I believe, because they play these shell games with these corporations. And again, lots of games going on with dates and activities surrounding the incorporation of these organizations, because it says like this one right here, Best Friends Animal Society, a domestic nonprofit, formation date 1968, 6/21, same date as Louisiana. And I would say that you know, that would mean, according to that would mean that they incorporated in Utah at that same time, which I have seen no evidence of that either.
Well, do you see below that though, the formation effective date?
Right.
That's what as far as the paperwork that I've looked at in Utah, that's
84.
the accurate date, because they were in Arizona before, and Las Vegas, even though I have found nothing for Las Vegas.
Right.
I've seen stuff in their Foundation Faith like flyers, but that date seems more accurate, the 7/25/1984. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I mean, how hard would it be to pay somebody off, like a registrar, right? And be like, just to make everything look cohesive.
Yeah, there's definitely something funky going on with their Utah documents, it seems. Because look, their land records are nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found either. They definitely incorporated in London. These are all the U.S. corporate documents that we're looking at here.
I think that they incorporated earlier than that, though. I think their business documents are in my way back. I haven't looked at those in a hot minute.
Are you referring to the Compulsions Analysis Incorporation?
The
is that like 64?
It was the one R&M something limited. I can't even remember the name anymore. It's the one where like they had the like listings with like the prices of their robes and all that stuff in it.
Right.
That was their original business filing.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's weird that you like, because it's with the relative to these Utah documents, it's strange that you can't look at a lot of their actual records anymore to when they actually transfer property. So there's definitely something that's going on with the funky nature of those records. But the one thing that really, so I mean, who knows? You know, it could be a registrar, it could be a county clerk somewhere. It's just filing things strangely, and again, you know, with obviously some sort of connections to through the Mormon hierarchy over the years, be it membership to their own cult or otherwise. There's numerous crossovers between the two organizations, not just that they're in the state of Utah together, but you know, I tend to think there may be some to that, because in Kane County, Utah is no different than any other place in Utah. They have some OG Mormon families running the elected officials there. I looked up their recent elected officials, and I saw a Lyman, which is the Lymans would be Asa Lyman would be the OG Mormon member. He'd be one of Joseph Smith's 12 disciples. So, you know, this is some old school Mormon heritage. Hard to tell is what I'm getting at there.
Makes sense. You know, these elitists all like to hang out together and pretend that they're not elitists. So,
and pretend that they don't know each other.
Yes, exactly. They definitely don't know each other.
We definitely don't know each other. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of the structure, I think, is still. I'm still quite puzzled after reviewing this. This is the original documents. You can see it signed. You know, that June of '68. You know, by old and notarized by old Tommy Baumler, the wandering bishop, one of Peter Levenda's crew of folks. but I think it's what really jumped out at me here, and I still really don't grasp, is the use of a lot of not only Vatican verbiage, which that just reminded me right there when I was reading this last page. It says pontiff right here. They have their own pontiff. They have their own hierarchy. It seemed so, reading these documents and looking at their hierarchy, which is not, when they were the process, they had chapters, right? Like, they were not known to have this publicly known to have the structure in which they established in this, right? Was that kind of where
No,
you
not at
concluded
all.
with that too?
Yeah, not at all. This was unexpected, to say the least. It was kind of shocking because when you read any of their teachings, even the inner teachings for the inner processians, because they have the outer processians and the inner, even the teachings, any of the other filing paperwork, nothing looks like this.
Yeah, that was kind of my take on it too. And even looking at it right now, just the word pontiff just keeps, jumping out at me. Then you have the High Council, and then you have these different councils. There's a specific area I'm looking for here. Of course, you have the teacher listed, and the teacher was what, de Grimston, right? That was his,
I believe so.
call sign or pseudonym.
One of them, yeah.
You got the High Office of Messenger. I mean, to a certain degree, some of these terms strike me as very Scientology-like as well, with the messenger's office and stuff like that. So you have the Order of the Messengers, which being angel, archangel, throne, principality, dominion, power, cherubim, and seraphim, which that's all some old Testament, you know what I mean? Like Catholicism type stuff to me.
Yeah, I think that it is very Scientology-esque too, because like what they present to the public is like just cherry-picked terms from that, like the messenger, you're a prophet, you're a messenger, the council of luminaries, whatever, like they're just picking little things and that's what they're presenting for public consumption.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And like here's a term that I was familiar with prior to reading this document: acolyte. Like, that's a term they use pretty frequently and openly in other publications, right?
Yeah.
But right here, this stuck out to me. So this is kind of how they treat it like the Vatican. So the Vatican has their Holy See, right? And they have their holy, is it ordinance? Is that what they're calling it? But they basically, right here, these prelates. So they've divided these things, the office of the prelate within the process church of the final judgment. It seems like they have their own, like where the Catholic Church has cardinals, they have their own high councils and prelates within these different divisions, or prelates, I believe, is how they use that term, as like a state or a division or like a region. But it seems like they have their own kind of like cardinal system, right? Like where someone's in charge of each region, or prelate.
That's the way that they make it sound, and it doesn't really identify how that would work as far as the hierarchy structure. But I would imagine it makes sense that that would still be going on today, because it states that it's the four corners of the Americas, so that covers
Right.
every coast.
Right. I'm actually trying to find that part right now. I was kind of buying time until I could find that part. But no, here's a good part. There's areas that keep jumping out at me. I mean, I've read this, and I'm looking back over, and some of the stuff is jumping out at me again, of the strange logistical organization of this corporation, in which, again, they can call themselves the Process Church, or they can call themselves Foundation Faith, or they can call themselves the Best Friends Animal Society. These are their corporate documents according to their own records. Like, this is how they still, like, they just changed the name on these corporate documents. They didn't change their incorporation or how they function. So ostensibly, this is how they function still today, according to what their records say, like according to their own records.
Well, they disbanded in 1974. What are you talking about?
Right. So we have the abbey and the office of the doorkeeper, who shall be appointed by the teacher of the church, and he shall be charged with the task of appraising the worthiness of all candidates of the faithful who seek entry into the monastery, in order they may be made perfect in the ways of God. So I'm assuming, again, the teacher is in this context, again, is Robert de Grimston. So it sounds like he's overseeing somebody called the doorkeeper who manages each abbey. Again, from my understanding, they're called chapters, but here they're calling them abbeys. Very Catholic-like, it seems.
Yeah,
It
it's very
sounds
bizarre.
like Ghostbusters, right? Like, who was the doorkeeper?
Yeah, it's all very strange.
Doorkeeper is 2 vicars. I'm not sure what that means, but I know vicars is a Catholic term.
Yeah, I
2
have no
pillars.
idea. I'm not Catholic. Not knocking Catholics. I just have no idea.
Yeah. I'm very much not versed in some of their terminology. I'm just trying to catch up on some of these comments here. Folks have some good ones. I see. I'm just prelates is the hierarchical definition. Okay. Yeah, so that's like, part of the organizational structure. Watch JJ turn red. It's a highly disputed topic here in that conversation. I would argue my face is the hue of a stop sign, but others may disagree. Yeah, so the exactly, the keymaster. That's exactly what I think about when I see the doorkeeper. Are you the keymaster from Ghostbusters? But yeah, I'm trying to find that part about the corners of the earth because I think that's the most intriguing part, right? Was that probably the most thing that stood out the most from this organizational structure was how they were going to compose any change of power and how they were going to operate?
I think that it only became relevant when I found Leland Cole's Facebook page where
No,
he had some really, really wild takes about what went down during Hurricane
no.
Katrina. So
Okay, I
that
didn't know
was
he had
when
any takes on that. What did he have to say?
Oh, well, so I found his Facebook and he talked about how when Marianne died, because according to Timothy Wiley, she was mauled to death by Michael Vick's dogs on the best friend property. That was around the time of Katrina. And when they were down there, they were basically stepping over humans that could have been saved to save animals while chanting Long Live Hecate. But it was everybody coming together from the 4 corners of the Americas. So
Exactly.
it was a
Yeah.
ritual for the oracle for Hecate. So, I mean, that makes sense to me.
No, it's same here. But and the one thing that I don't see in those documents is the term oracle. Right?
I mean, yeah, but that's the name game for them, right?
Yeah, they have but I wonder if so you have the teacher in those documents, and then they have something called the pontiff. And if Marianne is the leader and she's the oracle, I wonder if she's also going by the term the pontiff.
It's a good question.
But
Or
yeah,
if
here's an
she's the
article.
teacher.
She could also be the teacher too. I just know that Dick Grimston's been referenced as that before as well. But it could be an interchange thing for sure. But yeah, I mean, they were definitely down there. There's numerous articles with the best friends folks down there in Katrina. So yeah, that I didn't, with having those comments from firsthand experience of these folks down there is interesting because they certainly seem to be complying with their corporate documents because that was when Marianne Grimston died, correct?
Yeah, actually, I just found in the way back, they wrote an entire book about their time
Oh,
in down there during Hurricane Katrina. So obviously, I don't think that they're going to be sharing insights like Leland because there were people, saying basically very process responses trying to debunk him. Like the process wouldn't do
sure.
that. They disbanded in 1974. How would that be possible? And he's like,
Yeah.
no, we
Those
did it.
people don't
Trust
even
me.
know each other.
Yeah, exactly. They're just strangers down there. But I mean, that made sense to me when he said that they all came together to do this and that it was a ritual because, that is what it says. When someone dies, when one of these leaders dies, they all have to come back together and they have to come to New Orleans. So it makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, I still haven't found that exact verbiage. I know you do quote it pretty, from my recollection, pretty accurately there, ma'am. But here's another section here within this these corporate documents, which speaks of a meeting like almost like a corporate meeting of like shareholders or something. Like some sort of corporate meeting that must take place in New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. It says special meeting of the members of the high councils. So the high councils seem to be like the district managers or consistory of chapters, which I don't even know what that means, may be called at any time and place as determined by the pontiff. No meeting of the High Council of consistory of chapters of this church may be held outside of the city of New Orleans of the state of Louisiana. So, by virtue of their own documents, would you agree that Louisiana they've basically made as their Rome, their Vatican City, if you will, in relative comparison to Vatican operations?
I think that it is, and I think that people should keep in mind that the state of Louisiana operates under Napoleonic law. So it is kind of its own little, I mean, it's kind of its own little country, in my opinion. I don't know
Sure.
if you've been there. It is definitely a different place, and it's not just because, the locals say that it is. Legally, it is. So I think that it's not a coincidence that they were there, that they linked up with Tommy Baumler, that's where they chose to be incorporated. I think that there is something deeper there. I really want to look into, is something I've been meaning to look into, is if Scientology, what their presence was, what L. Ron Hubbard's presence was in Louisiana prior to that or during that time, just to see, because
Good
it's,
question.
I feel like this is, I don't know. It's kind of like, I know, I don't know. I feel like Scientology would have such a hard time being successful there, but not the process, because this, you get, your sort of like Christian, look that you can go with, and also like you can get down with that voodoo, because they were
Yeah,
hanging out with like what is it, Mother Oneida Toops, who helped Anton LaVey set up the Church of Satan. Like, there's a
exactly.
lot of crossover there, so I think that tracks. But yeah, I don't know.
And New Orleans does seem to be a hotbed of satanic, not just satanic activity, but vampire activity, which I kind of trace. It's my opinion, at least, that the modern day vampirism goes back to Michael Aquino's Temple of Set and their higher order of vampires, which was
That
started by
makes
his
sense.
wife Lilith.
It would
They're
make
apparently a
sense.
very high council within the Temple of Set.
Well, makes sense.
I know you have your own noided theories about the activities of Lilith and her New York City or Staten Island activities, right?
Well, yeah, because she was setting up. So she
Right.
she ran the Lilith Grotto, which covered the tri-state area out of New Jersey. That includes New York. She literally helped set up one of the Church of Satan's locations and held a black mass that was featured on TV on Staten Island. So she's right there. And,
Sure.
everybody's like, it's completely irrelevant that David Berkowitz and Michael Aquino were both at Fort Knox at the same time. And it's like, okay, whatever you say, because she's already in New York, right? The process is in New York. We know that. Staten Island is a small place. I don't believe that the
That's true.
process was that they only went to Staten Island like it was just a Grimston and Father Malachi McCormick. I don't believe that, because I'm finding more and more founders coming out of New York and Westchester County. I don't buy it at all.
Yeah, exactly. There seems to be just a hotbed of this activity there. So, and again, it seems to me like the more I'm looking, like again, the longer I look at the process, the more I see an organization. It's a, it's like the Vatican too, right? It's like, and it came around right after the Vatican too. You know what I mean? Or right at the same time, right? These two things happen again. There's more comparisons to the Vatican, but um, that's rooted in my blood. I gotta hate the Vatican. It's a clan Vance tradition dating back to at least the early 1600s. My ancestor Sir Patrick Vance, the associate of King James, the guy that rewrote the Bible. Pretty sure the Vatican didn't like that guy. They tried to blow him up with a bunch of gunpowder. Um, the but yeah, the more I look at the I'm always happy to diminish the Vatican, but the more I look at this stuff, like the Vatican changed their operations around the same time. It's like it's almost like the same type of deal, right? Where like they're creating like the process. I'm not saying the Vatican and the process have that deep of a connection and why they changed operations at the same time. I'm saying like the way the Vatican changed operations, it's almost like the Scientology offshoot operation was like a revamping of Scientology, right? Like to the point where we're going to redo, because again, there's so much correlation, I think, with the corporate structure here. So like, Scientology was doing a certain amount of business in a certain way before 64, like the Vatican was before Vatican II. And I think after 64, they're doing a lot of this kind of business, right? Like the process was to wrap up a lot of this, not only Scientology cult business, but also Satan cult business, Jesus cult business. To me, the process seems more and more like the new franchise in which we're going to wrap up all these other old franchises under. It's the new corporate structure, the new way we're going to do business.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily turn a cheek to the concept or the idea that the Vatican and the process weren't tied up, because I mean they were. That was in Ed's court records. Reverend Arthur
Sure.
Gibson, he testified for them and said that if he had, his own church or whatever, that he would be selling the sex magazine, or he would have the sex magazine out on display outside. So
That's
I
a
mean,
valid
and
point.
that was when he
Valid
was
point.
training under the Vatican in Rome. So was he there when they were doing all that weird stuff? Probably. He probably was, because
That's
that
a
court
valid
date
point.
wasn't until 73.
That's a very valid point, ma'am. And of course, the museum where all the founders have visited is in Rome, the Process Church Museum. So there seems to be a reason to have it there. There's definitely some crossover in activities and operations there for sure. I forgot about the guy who tried to advocate putting their magazines out. Like that made sense. But yeah, I mean, well, now that I think about it, maybe there is more to the reasons why they both changed operations around the same time in the 60s.
That's what I'm saying. There might be.
But it just seems like, as you're pointing out, with like Michael Aquino's wife Lilith being involved with these grottos, the relative to the occult activities of the same areas of Staten Island and Westchester, where the process so infamously operated for many years. It just seems like her, like, again, like all of these groups seem to almost collect underneath each other through a common thread of the process. So, like, and they may not just may not all be processed, with the whole tales of the numerous kind of process members extension into the children of the Untermeyer Park cult. That I think that's a good example of what I'm kind of inferring, is that it's a wrap-up operation of, because again, that cult existed before the process, right? So it's a wrap-up operations where numerous individuals from the process are inserting themselves in other organizations, etc. That's what it seems like to me. This goes on, and again, it's like a wrap-up of, hey, you're in our organization now. You're in our downstream. You're in our downstream, right? They're all about multi-level marketing. These people, so they're just signing people up in their downstream under this new format, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think it makes sense, especially, when you consider like the process and them coming into New York officially or unofficially, but you have so many of these founders that are at Best Friends right now who are from
Indeed.
these elitist families out of Westchester County, very powerful families. And so
There's
there's
a
a
list
lot
for
of
you right here.
yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of crossover, and it would make sense that, hey, like, let's just consolidate everything, right? Like,
Yep.
either fall in line, we're going to consolidate because we're all doing the same thing, or just get out of the way, which would also kind of make sense if
Yeah,
we're
I'm sure
going
they're
by the
happy to do that,
theory.
right?
Well, if we're going by the theory that the Son of Sam crimes were targeted hits, yeah, it makes a
Exactly.
lot of sense.
Exactly. And if you don't listen, then you're going to be like those guys, right? That's kind of the message being sent.
I mean, yeah, I think so.
Get in line or else, And I think that's the thing that makes the most sense with some of these things. And yeah, and I honestly think that, like, within these organs, so like, let's say, like, it's like a franchise, right? I'm just throwing this out there. This is just a thought I've had. That wasn't the thought. So it's like a franchise, right? So, like, if they're adding folks into their fold, if you will, or incorporating folks into their organization in a franchisee capacity, which is precisely how Scientology works, right? Like, when they open up a new Scientology org, this is like, it's like you're a franchisee of Scientology. They pay Scientology for their materials and et cetera, and their name and licensing and stuff like that. That's my understanding of how these things work, because they have independent, like a Sea Org or whatever, not a Sea Org, an org, if you will. They have each one. If you look up their corporate documents in different cities for the orgs, they're all under different names and like stuff like that, right? So I think that's like the way it looks like. My understanding is it's like a franchise. So that's kind of the way I look at this, right? Like if Lilith Grottos are being rolled up into this new process thing, right? Like maybe Lilith Grottos is represented by one of these high council positions, right? And the consistory of chapters. Again, whatever that means.
It could be.
Like the leaders of these organizations that are rolling up gets to this high council because part of me wants to just discard any reference to this format of their organization from their own corporate documents because it makes no sense relative to their public facing operations. However, I want to argue that's ridiculous. These are spooks, and that's why it makes no sense relative to their public facing operations.
Yes, they are spooks, and I don't care what people say. This is who they are,
Right.
and I do think that they were kind of the poster child, or the golden show pony for wrapping up a lot of these cults and putting them into one massive umbrella. It doesn't mean that there's not a bunch of different factions. Like someone had asked earlier, I saw in the chat, like if I was referencing the Children of God when I was mentioning the children cult. No, but we do know, and it's a good question because the process did support the Children of God when they were being investigated by the New York Attorney General in 1974 after these pedophile allegations came out. So I think that is part of their Jesus faction, their Jehovah faction, however you want to look at it. But then all of these other groups, these satanic groups, those can fall under that. And then also the Scientology angle, because Lilith was doing I don't know, like the psychic circuit with Ingo Swann. He's one of the most notorious Scientologists. This was before they started the Temple of Set. So I don't see someone getting on stage with someone like Ingo because Scientology cares so much about their public image. I don't see her being allowed on that stage unless she was given blessing by the church.
Yeah, that's definitely a reasonable analysis in my opinion. Makes a lot of sense. And Ingo Swann, he's deep in all this aviary alien psyop business as well. He's been in that for years. That whole SRI situation, all those guys, all those Scientologists out of SRI, and pushing these Scientologists pushing alien narratives. Go figure.
Shocking, truly.
Shocking, utterly shocked. So you mentioned also how these folks are often at the forefront of disasters, and one disaster that I have always, this interests me, their activities, and it was and I highlighted some of the quote unquote is what I assert is some charity fraud situation. Just go over some of the questionable activities of these folks, but it was the Haiti earthquake in 2010. I actually worked the logistics for that earthquake for the Air Force in DC at the Emergency Command Center. Was one of my duties at the time. So when that happened, I had to go report to the command center and then start coordinating units to get down there, including the security elements to go down there first and secure the airfield, because that was my priority. That's what I conduct. That was the logistics duty for the military police. So we were down there first. I mean, I remember going through all vetting, helping vet other organizations down there, security wise, everything else like that, coordination things. I don't ever remember. These people flew under the radar, you know what I mean? I don't ever remember them going on, but they were there pretty early with the whole scene down there. It seems best friends, that is.
Yeah, I mean, there's one video. It's very poor quality where it's an ad and they're down there in Haiti, and I mean, I've found stuff of them. I've put together a pretty strong presentation with circumstantial evidence of some shell companies, some shell fronts in Ukraine right now that they're using to just blatantly launder money.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if FTX is involved in that.
I don't know.
Being the conduit in which to funnel that money.
Right.
Yeah, so I like I said, I was going through this because, I was like, they really were on their ground early. I'm like, how? I don't ever remember any animal groups going down there at that time, but, it's certainly possible. It didn't necessarily have to go through my office. I'm just saying I was definitely involved with coordinating a lot of the early onset of the activities that responded to that. And definitely never anything that I recall crossing my mind. It's interesting that they do get down there in these scenes. But like right here, it says they were part of a group, Animal Relief Coalition for Haiti, right? And their own. So that was in 2010. So I pulled up their. Again, I went down a brief. I'm not gonna lie to you. I went down a brief charity fraud, situation from the school of Charles Ortel, this dude who's gone over hundreds of hours of Clinton charity frauds. So I'm very familiar with which states that have the highest like requirements for like filing stuff. So happen to be Massachusetts is the highest state of like filing stuff. They have the most documents on record requirements wise within their Secretary of State for corporate filings. And this animal relief people just happened to be out of Massachusetts. So I went to Massachusetts. I went to ProPublica first just to pull the 990s for best friends, and it says they donated money, and it has an address for those Haiti people. I just think it's interesting that these people, it's not necessarily unique to the best friends folks, but it certainly appears to be charity fraud when things like this go on. But Animal Relief Coalition for Haiti. This is their IRS filing from the best friends folks. Easton, Massachusetts, right? Says they're registered in Massachusetts. They got an EIN number. Then you go over to Massachusetts and search for that EIN number, and you get nothing.
Do you see that one? Do you see the Utah Coalition for Animals? That's best friends too. That's right. One of their shell yeah.
Yep. I was gonna. Yep. Thank you for pointing that out. Actually, I had some of that open here a moment ago. Must have closed it because they do have some of those shells.
They have a lot. They have a lot.
And they're never open about it. So, like, if you look at their Massachusetts filing, these are their only subsidiaries, right? But if you look at other filings, like you said, they have that Utah one. They have other subsidiaries. It's weird. More of their shell games, it seems, that goes around with these things. I just think it's, if anyone cares about ever looking at charity frauds, like the IRS clearly does not care. Like, there's so much of these type of deals, but like it's funny to me that these people be so blatant with their activities that we'll just we'll donate to involve ourselves and donate in fake charities because this charity does not exist.
Yeah, I mean that one in the one in Ukraine that I found, I mean, the website, when you look at it, it's literally just stock photos of like, it's a stock photo for like the board members, but it's the same person. You click on it, there's nothing, and it's all stock filler for like all of their updates, and nothing has been touched in over a year. But you can see where there's links to do direct bank, like international bank transfers, international bank wires. And
Sure.
There's articles that are supporting this alleged, charity, but there's no activity. And
Right.
They're called the Best Friends Animal Society. But it's not
Right.
under BFAS, because BFAS, just like how you showed there with Haiti, and that's a good example, that ARCH, like that was the acronym for it. That's how they
Sure.
hide themselves internationally, is joining with other groups and putting it under some sort of weird coalition. Because when you look up, if you try to search like Best Friends Animal Society as it stands, what we know of it in Ukraine and anywhere around there, it says that they don't operate outside of the United States. But that's a lie. That's a blatant lie.
Right.
There's proven activity. There's a paper trail of them with weird like dogfighting rings in Israel and Egypt and Ethiopia, stuff like that. So, I mean, they are everywhere. That's just that's how they hide.
No, that is a good point. They do seem to link in well with other organizations, but I also would assert they use fake organizations.
Oh, absolutely.
So right here, this is out of the FBI record, right? If you look up Best Friends Cleaning or Best Friends Horses, right? This is Utah license plates registered to these corporations. They've never existed in the state of Utah or any other state, right?
Yeah.
So this is so how, again, like the stuff within Utah with these people, I'm willing to believe that they can get away with anything documentation wise. Because here's another one, Best Friends Baking Company, right? Again, they have a Chevy 1999. This is a report from 2000 or 2001. They have a 1999 Chevy with a license plate registered in the state of Utah, the great state of Utah, Mormons God country. There's Zion, if you will. It doesn't exist. It's not a real company.
Yeah.
How you get registrations for a not real company? It's not. I'm not saying it's not inactive. It's never existed. So, they're definitely up to some shenanigans when it comes to documents and filings and shell companies and that sort of thing. I definitely agree with you there, ma'am, for sure. One thing I noticed,
How do
and
they
I
do it?
always
They're
like to point out
spooks.
also, exactly. Well, you just took the words out of my mouth because I was going to point out, if you are a spook, you got to have money, right? And look at how much money they have, because this is 2010, and in 2010 they took in 42 mil that year. No big deal, mind you. The documents they filed in Massachusetts that year happens to have a different revenue. I would assert that's by IRS definition of fraud. That's a different story altogether. They clearly can't track their own income, which that's always a sign of fraud when you have multiple filings with different incomes. However, this is and again, this is from the state of Massachusetts where they have to file these things. This is an independent audit report. Again, these are the Massachusetts laws that require this. They took in $120 million last year.
Yeah.
100. I'm sorry, no wait, 160. 4 times what they made in 2010.
Yeah.
4 times.
That's a lot of money, guys. Where's the money going,
160
guys?
million? That's bigger than a lot of retail corporations. Walmart only does probably 400 million a year.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, guys. That's a lot of money. Where's that money going? Especially because they have an incredibly poor track record regarding dealing with like humane, like shelters, local shelters. They have a horrible track record. So where is all this money going?
Exactly. Yeah, right here. It was 152 million, 5,566. A lot of dough.
Yeah.
Yeah, look how much they pay their staff too. They are not, they by no means a poor staff there.
Well, that's the founders, like the people like Julie Castle, Gregory, Batistas, they all are walking home with a really fat payday. But the regular staff, I think that from everything that I've read, they negotiate a lower income for them because of that like HUD that they have in Kane County with that huge property expansion so that the employees can live on the property. And from what I understand, they only hire people from out of state.
Yeah, that makes sense. Look, it's the paying 12 cents an hour game that the Scientologists play, right? With their staff.
Yep.
Yeah, $4.7 million last year for the management of this organization. 4 points. I mean, which is a drop in the bucket, which relative to their total revenue, they're probably going to say, well, we're underpaid, but like nonetheless, like a nonprofit animal shelter, $4.7 million just for their management staff, their management staff. It's crazy. The biggest no-kill animal shelter in the state of Ohio did $240K last year. $160 million.
Yeah.
It's a big disparity.
I agree.
So,
and I think
if you want to fund a spooky operation, they found a great way to do it.
Absolutely. It's the perfect
tax-free way to do it. Right.
And JW Parsons in your chat said, and I agree, they're definitely not spending it on hookers and blow.
Oh, never wasting on hookers and blow. Never.
No, definitely not. That's not where it's going towards.
All on the up and up. I mean, look, we have an independent audit here. Of course, it's legit and legal, right?
Sure. Yeah, they didn't.
They wouldn't. Yeah, they can't. You can't produce a fake independent audit, can you?
No, not at all. You can't slide some money underneath the table. I mean, I don't even know, where they come up with these numbers of, the animal care. Obviously, yeah, advertising.
Right, that's a substantial number.
It is. It absolutely is. And I just, it's not bore out by the facts of what people report as their experiences with these people.
Look at that number. 187 million in-kind. That's their operational expenses, in-kind expenses here. $187 million. And this is 2023 alone. That's crazy. Yeah. You're right though. The experiences of these people, yeah, they're not rolling. Or I'm sorry, this is the year ending 2022. So September. But yeah, you're right. The experiences are like, yeah, they're not balling like they're balling in these documents. That's for sure.
No, and I mean the people that have, left the local humane, the local shelters that have dealt with contracts with them, I mean, it's generally very poor experiences that are reported, and I think that, a good chunk of this money is probably handled with us settling outside of court for some of those cases regarding, wrongful deaths, injuries, things like that, with some of
Oh,
these
for sure. Well, they're
dogs.
liquid. If you have any concerns about their liquidity, ma'am, they're liquid. Right
Yeah,
here, 56 million or 50 or $67 million liquid.
yeah,
So those out of court settlements, no problem, right? 67 mil slush
yeah.
fund. That's in addition to their $75 million in investments. What nonprofit has $75 million investment portfolio? I'll tell you one. The Mormons, they had $120 billion investment slush fund. So these people out in Utah are just, they're sitting on some cash. These nonprofits.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is lobbying as well, because I think it's the Humane Society, or it might be the ASPCA. When I was looking into the Doris Day Animal Foundation,
Oh,
it seems that they've been able to lobby their way into where the Humane Society is now a part of Best Friends. It's just not publicly presented that way, but they do pretty much own it. It's just under their umbrella now. So, I mean, they
that's
do have a
interesting.
lot of lobbying power.
Yeah, because they do mention their national programs in here, one of their line items in this audit. So that would probably be the Humane Society stuff then, huh?
Yeah, it's the Humane Society or the ASPCA, but because
Yeah.
I mean that's where the Doris Day Foundation falls under that, Best Friends, that's theirs now. So
Yep. Very questionable activity. Even if they weren't formerly known as the process, still the process, um, I would still have questions around an animal shelter rolling in this kind of dough. But I mean, again, if you want to fund a spooky operation, he certainly seemed to have located that best way to do that.
yeah, I would agree. And it's not just animal advocacy. I mean, I've had people that are in or were formerly in the like goth rap scene, and
No.
people that were in the metal scene that have just started contacting me like, hey, the process is a problem within like the entertainment industry right now, and it's very well known, like that name is not a stranger to people within the entertainment industry, which I think is really fascinating because I
Yeah.
don't know any celebrities. Like, and obviously, I think that like goth hip hop is kind of niche, but I've seen some of the people that they've been built with, and they are bigger names. And so I don't know. I'm kind of wondering where some of this other money is going. Is it going towards, propping up some of these entertainers that they
Yeah.
want to be platformed? Other entertainment ventures, things of that sort. Maybe Netflix stuff, maybe not. I don't really know.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. Well, you got my wheels turning here, ma'am. So it's interesting you say that because I was actually in my free time I like to go over on the Third World Assassin show, dress as the Unabomber, and talk crazy conspiracy theories with its host Clint Eastwood. Um, Highly recommend the show. We're getting some good conversations. Jen the Ninja, recent guest, he's often over there with me, or at the same time we often cross paths over there in conversations. Anyhow, I was talking about the same subject the other night. This intersection of folks like Rick Rubin in this whole Jay-Z situation and P Diddy situation popping off because Rick Rubin and all this hip hop scene, right? Rick Rubin, Mr. Process himself, the music producer who produced Skinny Puppies, The Process. Well, he founded Def Jam Records with Russell Simmons, and it's Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin who put on Jay-Z and put on P Diddy to their own labels within the whole music, hip hop system. They were basically franchises of Simmons and Rubin. And at some point in time, Rubin and Simmons had a falling out and whatnot. And currently today, Simmons is living in the nation of Bali. He sold all of his American property and fled the United States. Oh, I lose you.
Did you? Am I here?
Oh, there you are. You're back. I thought it was my end.
Whoops.
My internet was
Okay.
going out earlier.
Am I still here? Okay.
Yep, we're
Sorry.
back. We're back. Okay. It was your
Yeah.
end, not mine. Okay.
I
Went green
did
for a
hear
second.
that Simmons, it's Simmons, right? That he's out of the country. Like he dipped
Yeah,
out.
he left in 2021, apparently. I looked he sold all of his shit and said, I'm out.
I mean, I think that it's super sus that I had pointed out previously that really weird PI firm that got caught tailing Leah Remini and J-Lo. I think that they were
That's
tailing
right.
J-Lo. I don't think that they were tailing Leah Remini because
That's
J-Lo's
right.
dad is a Scientologist, and there's that stuff with Diddy. Like, I do think that there's something there, and I think that it's tangible, like, because Scientology and the process are so tied into the entertainment industry. It sounds like Diddy had a really finely tuned blackmail operation, and it's why would Scientology be excluded from that? I mean,
Sure.
Jaguar Wright even said that it's well known among, this sort of hip hop crowd or culture. She's like, oh yeah, we know that the Scientologists are out there doing like a lot of this harassing and gang stalking. Like, it's not a surprise, referencing the Diddy situation in particular as far as harassing victims. So I do
Sure.
think that there's something there. I just think that people don't want to give that much weight to it. They obviously want to isolate it and don't want to look at it as a problem that is not going to stop with any of these individuals being punished because somebody else has already taken over.
I think that's a great assessment, ma'am, for sure.
That's the show that he had Tom
Yep.
O'Neill on, and that Tom O'Neill decided to move the goalpost and say that the process disbanded in 1978 and there was not enough evidence for his satisfaction. And I say, kick rocks, Tom, but I digress.
Absolutely. Yeah, he did perpetrate that same narrative, didn't he? Yeah, I just think there's a lot of intersection, between, again, Mr. Process, Rick Rubin, and some of these other characters, specifically, again, Jay-Z and Diddy, who they only got to be, hip hop moguls thanks to Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons, who actually did business and who really put them on was Edgar Bronfman Jr., whose sisters funded NXIVM and were high-ranking members of NXIVM, who the same cult Jay-Z is connected to. So again, these situations, and by NXIVM I mean what I like to call is the Albany chapter of the Process Church.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's not forget the process ties and the not Son of Sam ties, depending on who you ask, to the whole Bronfman thing. Yeah, that's a bingo for me.
Yeah, so there's definitely something to be said there relative to the process, Rick Rubin, again, the Albany chapter of the process, because again, as they like to brag, the neo-processians have said that they're the intermediary parties. They've bragged about this, that they're the intermediary parties between the old process, the new process, and claimed the Albany chapter never disbanded. So if that's true, you either have an offshoot chapter of Scientology, the process chapter of Albany, and you have the NXIVM, which is an offshoot of Scientology, coexisting in the same city, miles from one another, or you have the same organization. I would argue you have the same organization. The Albany chapter of the process morphed into what is known as NXIVM. And I think they do a lot of the same activities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have my process mole that's in William Sims Bainbridge's process alpha group. And, there's photos that I was sent and that I've shown that it's them in New York at, I think it says their Albany chapter, and it's like 77 or 78. And they're all standing there inside the house. And so it's like,
we're in all black, right?
Yeah. And it's, William Sims Bainbridge. That's like one of the only color photos from when he was young. But yeah, he's right there with them.
That creepy bastard. And further exemplifying my theories, and we've already discussed the elite nature of this cult, the process, but my theory is that the organization that founded America is those families are deeply involved in this movement. That is the Society of Cincinnati. And once again, more evident. I mean, one example of that would be the Welds and some other examples along those lines, but you pointed out this one to me recently with William Sims Bainbridge, that he's with one of those families. Now, he's not likely a member, but he is definitely no worse than a fourth cousin away from a paternal member of the Society of Cincinnati by the last name Bainbridge, from the same Captain Peter Bainbridge of the Maryland chapter of the Society of Cincinnati.
Well, and his grandfather, William Seaman Bainbridge, was also a member, and the wife, so his grandmother, she was born in Yonkers. And I mean, how long are we going to do this and run in circles? This is literally the most elitist cult out there.
For sure. But, I think speaking to how it could be accepted in the music and movie, Hollywood circles, and not known outside of those circles, I find that very reasonable because they don't want to tell people of the elite status that they've reached, right? This is treated as an elite thing. You can't tell the non-elite people because they're already rolling with the new human concepts within these crowds, right? The homo novus concepts. So this is past that even. So they're definitely not going to tell the non-homo novus people, right? The really the bourgeois people of America, or wherever, whatever country, they're not going to tell them about these things. That's for sure. That's the way I look at it. It's of that elite status. They've already achieved this compartmentalized mindset that they're already above their own fellow Scientologists, the homo novus. So, right. So as L. Ron Hubbard put it, so the regular masses are below that. They're definitely not going to be talking about anything elite with them.
Well, no. And I mean, it's put it back to like what they present to the public. What is the public consumption narrative? What is people like, I don't know, Rick Rubin, Tom O'Neill, Josh Zeman,
Tom.
Manny Grossman, people of their ilk, that it was just a kooky cult, right? It was a counterculture movement. And it was something that kind of fizzled out and really had no significance and had no meaning. That perspective changes when you see A, that they're still in existence, but B, that the people that created it and have sustained it and kept it going, regardless of what faction you look at, they are some of the most powerful people, like come from the most powerful families in the country. And a lot of them come from the same place. A lot of them come from Westchester County in New York, which is extremely bizarre. And the Son of Sam just gets, weirder and weirder every day when you look at that. But it doesn't fit with the facts anymore when you're looking at it that way. It's not a kooky cult. There's not all these elitist families. They happen to get together and form this organization that, I mean, it's 2024 now. They were incorporated officially in 1968. So, I mean, that's a big time disparity of 7 years for their, public narrative, or 6 years versus the reality.
Yeah, and who knows what these high councils have been doing for the last 40 years, 45 years, that unbeknownst to anyone else, right? No one's, Ed was tracking these things in his notes, obviously, with having some of the corporate records. He's obviously going to be aware of the composition of this organization, but I didn't see a lot of record of him trying to answer some of those questions, like chasing down who are these high councils, right? What are they doing? Where are they located? Where are these abbeys? I know where a chapter is, but where's an abbey, right? I didn't see a lot of, I'm not trying to diminish Ed's work there. It's obviously, he's done quite an effort, but I'm saying I think these are some unanswered questions maybe that fell through some of those, cracks in some of his investigations, or Maury Terry's investigations, right? Because from the records I've seen of Maury's, which is obviously not very inclusive. There's lots of records that are obviously not seen by myself or anyone else. But what I'm saying is, I don't think he got into that kind of chasing down the composition. So if they have indeed beat records, which I think is the only way to kind of view the situation, they have been sticking to that. Who are these high councils, and what have they been doing for the last 40, 50 years?
I mean, the only argument that I would make for that is that Ed only got that because of that lawsuit in the UK. That's the only reason that he got access to it. And I don't think that, as far as getting something officially on the record to answer those questions, yes, it would be helpful, but I don't think that his lawyer would have I think that it would have gotten lost in the weeds, and I don't think that the judge would have let it fly. Because, I mean, the judge was sick of their shit within, I think, halfway through day 2. The judge is like, they're not saying anything. And I would argue that...
I recall that part of the transcript where they're just buying time.
He's just like, come on, thank you, let's wrap it up. Yeah. And I think with Maury's files, I have been told by someone, and I've been given specific numbers of the files that were originally presented, that people saw physically, and then what was removed and what people were allowed to look at. I think that Maury very well could have had some of these things. I think that
so too, yeah.
I think he could have had some of these magazines, like the Process Scene magazine with Willowbrook. I think that there's a very good likelihood that Maury might have had that. I think that he probably had a lot of this stuff, and I think that a lot of this stuff was taken out of what people were allowed to look at, because it probably would have presented too many questions.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point you present. There would be some good reasons in which to continue to keep these things from the public eye. Well, on that note of some of Maury's work, this is out of the FBI record, just something I had taken a note of at some point in time, and was looking through my notes, and I was like, oh, that is a good question. I mean, it still remains a good question as far as an unanswered question, I believe. This was out of the FBI file, so this was somebody submitting the vault file, that is. Somebody submitted a Freedom of Information Act to the director in September of '87, and they're citing FOIA stuff, and they claim that I'm requesting this information for a book I'm writing under contract with Warner Books Incorporated in New York City. Now, I don't think that's Maury. Maury was writing for Doubleday Books.
I don't think it is either.
So I kind of wonder. I mean, they've blanked out whoever wrote this, but there's really not any other good information to glean from it. But I couldn't find any projects that were ever produced by Warner Brook, any notifications or announcements or anything like that about any projects from Warner Books.
Well, there's a handwritten letter in that file that it looks, and this is just my opinion. I'm not a handwriting expert, and I certainly don't endorse like handwriting analyses. I think it's kind of a joke, but there is a handwritten letter in that file, and it, in my personal opinion, because of the information that they redacted, because they redacted who sent it kind of like this, I think that it was written by David Berkowitz, because it was during the time that he was in jail, and it was requesting information on where the process had went. So I don't know if this was possibly something that, I mean, maybe he and Maury, or maybe he and somebody else. I mean, who really knows? Maybe they didn't want to tip off Doubleday. It's a possibility.
But somebody was under contract, it seems, though, right? I mean, at least by their own statements. I just think it's interesting that despite Sanders' lawsuit, as you were saying, in '87, somebody was willing to get a contract on this information.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that letter there, it's redacted who sent it, and then there's this handwritten letter that's very detailed, asking for information about the de Grimstons, naming Processians, and some of it does look like some of the Son of Sam letters, and I don't think that David wrote all of them. So it's up to people's judgment. It's just my opinion. It just doesn't make sense.
It definitely doesn't. I think it is interesting, though, that another publisher was willing to put a contract down to write a book on the process, but then somehow got shut down. Like that, there's no record of any book ever, and I'll get to that in a minute by any record, because I think other books have been shut down, right? But that one seemed to have been shut down. I think this is interesting. I like to call the FBI the Federal Bureau of Uninvestigations. They like to uninvestigate things.
Correct.
Here's a record from the file from 2004 where they're destroying evidence about the best friends.
Correct. Yeah, don't you love that? Yeah.
It's like they're slipping that in the file just to taunt people, like, we destroyed that shit. Here's the file. Here's the file of us destroying it. Good luck with that.
That's how I felt when I saw it. I'm like, oh, Here you go. Like, they're literally just destroying stuff for these people. Why are they destroying things for an animal nonprofit?
Right. Yeah. Like, what is so important that needs to be burnt, destroyed, never to be seen again? No, it's an interesting point you bring up about David Berkowitz filing his own FOIAs. I think that's a good point, because I don't think people realize. I certainly didn't realize until I saw some of the limited Terry files, the quote unquote Maury Terry unreleased documentation, file number 2, page 268 here. I mean, there is stuff to be gleaned from these files. Notably this, and I didn't realize that back in 1999, that David Berkowitz was not only getting updates on the internet back in '99, but also having a free flow of information, for people from the outside to give him this information, right? It seemed like he was pretty timely with it, is what I'm saying. So he's writing Maury a letter saying, hey, Maury, why did you make a second book follow up to your Ultimate Evil? He's like, what is this book? Somebody sent him this I Am Son of Sam by Terry from Barnes & Noble. And it has but it's not, so the other one was Warner Press. This is St. Martin's Press. So clearly not the same project that was referenced in that previous FBI filing necessarily, but this is David asking Maury what's up, and there's the ISBN number, right? And it says, Maury, for another matter, and this is very important, my friend also sent me a copy of the Barnes & Noble sales website. I'm including the copy here, which is what we see, which anyone who is online in the world can access. I would like to know what is going on. The book, which you said did not exist, does exist. In fact, it was just published in January by St. Martin's. Before, the previous paper I sent you only said that it would be available in the spring of 98. It has since been released in January of 99. It even has a sale price. My friend is ordering the book and hopes to have it soon. Is this the ultimate evil under a new title? Why did you tell me that your honcho at St. Martin's knew nothing about this book? Pretty interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, who knows what context are we missing from this conversation, right? Like, what else
Right.
was going on here with the correspondence, and where is the book?
Yeah, because the book exists. Here's Goodreads.com. It's got an ISBN and a 10 and an ISBN 13 number. So it was clear. And St. Martin's Press Incorporated. It was published, like you said, January of 99, 12/31/1998. So it did. So at some point in time, this book was in print. What this book was, I have no idea.
Neither do I.
But David had no idea, and apparently Maury had no idea. So I don't know what was going on here. But it seems to be a lot of shenanigans. Prior to the shenanigans that were introduced into Maury's life by none other than Hollywood actor James Franco, it seems like other shenanigans were present.
Possibly Scientology shenanigans. Who knows?
Perhaps. Because the Franco shenanigans weren't until like 2014, right?
I believe it was August of 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is years earlier shenanigans going. I had something else here. I don't know what I did with it, so you have to give me one moment. Is there any other topics so far, ma'am, that we've not covered on your journey of kind of going through some of the standard stuff and some of the revelations maybe you've achieved in your understanding of quote unquote what is the process?
Well, I mean, I have strong feelings about the topic. I could sit here and rant like a crazy person for, days, quite frankly. There's a lot to be uncovered. I mean, I think that this whole Westchester angle is it's just becoming a conspiracy, in my opinion. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it is a conspiracy out of Westchester County in particular. And I do want to, I'm working on it, but I do want to put together a presentation and present to people the theory that the founders that were born in Westchester, that they are the old guard of the children, because I do think that that is the case. It just doesn't make sense to me that they all happen to know each other. And why was none of this pointed out, that these people came from Westchester County, that they were born there, that so many of them are involved in real estate? What are we missing from Maury's files about Mr. or Mrs. Real Estate? Because I still lean towards Mrs. Real Estate, right? But what else are we missing? Because did he actually have an updated theory with his research files where this is a Westchester conspiracy with all of these really powerful real estate people? It's a possibility, but we're not going to know until we see those files, and until those files are, given, if they haven't been destroyed, which I don't have high hopes, to a university.
The FBI got their hands on them, ma'am. They're definitely out of here. They've definitely been destroyed.
I mean, they should have gone to a university. There's no reason, there's no excuse, because I mean, Princeton took Ed's dirty, stinky barn file.
I'm not buying that excuse either. But I think you're spot on with the assessment of Mrs. Real Estate in the matter, and it's possibly some of the reasons of why behind hiding some of that stuff, because she may not be around, but her son still is. So, and again, he was named in the files of Maury Terry as well as being a member of the cult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't see why people would kind of, make fun of that, because I mean, Marianne was at the head of it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So why wouldn't it be a woman at the head of the children? That it makes perfect sense to me.
I totally agree. Yeah, and Westchester just seems to be a more and more interesting place. Not only as the reasons you pointed out with the early onset of the founders of the organization, the more and more connections there. I mean, you have the other strange kind of tangential activities relative to some of the process, activities like the Haight Ashbury with Danny Castellero's sister, whose family's from Yonkers, not from Yonkers. I'm sorry, Mamaroneck, I believe, there in
Yep.
Westchester County, and
Yep.
other tangential matters such as that. You have the fact that these elite families, many of which reside there in around Westchester, from the Rockefeller estate, which exists there in Westchester, and houses, I think around 10 or 12 Rockefeller family mansions. They all live on the same plot of land. Speaking of this real estate aspect of the county, right? Then you have folks like RFK. RFK was the U.S. senator from New York who was allegedly murdered by elements of the process, right, with Sirhan Sirhan and other such characters. Now he was not only a U.S. senator from New York, he lived in Westchester County. So RFK Jr. grew up in Westchester County. These are things of the very elite nature that are going on right there. The Clintons, Bill Clinton runs around, is famously seen as running around the Rockefeller estate there in Westchester County. So again, they have a very deep NXIVM bend to their situation with the Clintons. Or again, as we discussed before, the Albany chapter of the process bend with that situation. So I think Westchester County becomes very interesting. And then something that was recently brought to my attention regarding something we've discussed in the past relative to possibly the accepted nature of this within the music scene with folks like the Blue Oyster Cult is they famously have an album cover, Secret Treatise, where they're wearing the process cloaks. They got the German Shepherds, but they have another album cover where they're just down the road a couple miles in Westchester County, a couple miles from the process headquarters at a different church. So I think there's a lot to be said with some of obviously some of their deeper connections into the process scene, but they used to frequent a place with the process scene going out to Long Island with not only Roy Radin, a lot of other elements in the Long Island narrative there. I didn't realize that there was this whole this club scene that out on Long Island that the Blue Oyster Cult would often play at, this place called the Oak Beach Inn, this real den of iniquity right next to Gilgo Beach where all the Long Island serial killer stuff's going on. So really makes you wonder.
I mean, Rex Huerman did it. It's just him, just like David Berkowitz did it. It's just exactly. David Berkowitz. It's just Rex Huerman.
Pay no attention to the other cult situations going on around these individuals.
Nope.
Solely responsible for it. Yeah,
they don't know each other. They've never met.
They definitely don't. Yeah, I just it really makes you wonder because again, there's so much Long Island activity with the process. And they have all this stuff they're putting on Rex right now, which does seem highly suspect.
I have some real unpopular takes about that I'm not going to get into because I don't want to upset people. But the process, their hand really isn't everything. I don't know why people are so reticent to at least, evaluate the information. I think that there's a good argument for their involvement in obviously Manson. I think Zodiac. I think some of the really shady stuff that was going on in Canada. I think the Gall and Sharp murders. I think that they were absolutely involved in that. There's also some weird crimes going on at the same time in the UK when Scotland Yard is investigating Bruce Davis. And then obviously
Manson, we have close Manson associate, huh? Bruce Davis.
Yep. And there's stuff going on the East Coast too. I mean, outside of just New York, you know what I mean? They are everywhere.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, back to in one more note, I was just considering with the Long Island thing that I for a moment I forgot there was your old pal Josh Zeman. He seems to be deeply ingrained in this process church cover-upper movement and also the Long Island serial killer cover-upper movement, or possibly the same cover-upper movement.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that he left out the process's volunteer program at Willowbrook in his Cropsey documentary?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still like the fact he tries to play that as an objective thing, but cuts off one of the lead detectives in the Cropsey case when he starts talking about satanic activity. He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to end it right here."
Yeah, they nobody's been able to give me a good reason yet, but hey, at least Doug Masico, aka Dougie Lucian, told me that it was not suspicious that they left it out. So at least they put their heads down at night and sleep well, knowing that they don't think it's suspicious about any of this.
Oh, you mean Lucian number 2, aka Doug?
Yes.
He's the second Lucian. So, what are your thoughts that they? So, is it weird that the what is ostensibly a faction of the process, given Doug's operation of the process.org, is integration into the whole neo process scene for decades and et cetera, et cetera. Well, it seems like that maybe the Satanic Temple, aka a wing of the process, got banned from Russia the same time Scientology did. Do you find that to be suspicious? both
I
both
just have
organizations banned from Russia in the same time.
it's like, no, come on, guys. Like, I'm sorry. It's why does the Satanic Temple have a e-meter, aka a P-scope, and why does Doug run around saying that he wants to perfect the e-meter's use, make the tech better, the technology better, when if we're going based off of science, right, then we know that the e-meter doesn't work. It's fake news. However,
Right.
why are they auditing people at the temple? Because he has admitted himself that he is using the e-meter, aka the P-scope.
Oh, and he looks so happy in that photo when he's showing it off. It looks very, for a man who doesn't really smile, he looks kind of happy.
Yeah, well, I don't know. There's a lot of shady stuff, and I have very strong feelings about all of it, and I think that Doug doesn't hide it. I think people should take Doug at his word, not what he says on TV when like he's on Tucker
Right.
Carlson and he's being an edge lord. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when he's in his element and he's speaking freely about his time and his history with the process, and he blatantly says that the theology is based off of process theology, that the statue is based off of process theology. How many connections do people need to understand that this is the Satan faction of the process?
I totally agree. I mean, again, when they get banned the same week from Russia as Scientology, I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it
You
does.
asked the attorney about connections to someone corrupt on Nick's channel. He answered wrong. Oh, I know you're talking about. Yeah, was it the John Ray? I'm not sure what question I asked him. Is that the one on Nick's channel you're talking? They're glitched. I apologize, glitched. I'm not tracking. You have to bring me up to speed. Yeah, so it seems like that from everything that you're saying there, Dana, and everything we're describing, everything I'm saying, it sounds like Ed was right. The process people are everywhere.
Yes, he was right. They are.
And I often wonder what is the underlying trend that causes this, right? Like what is the organizing principle, if you will? Like, we know that they're like we've asserted, they're wrapping up other cults under their umbrella, that kind of thing, new franchises, new plan of operations worldwide, that is. But like, how do they do it? Like, what's the organizing principle? How do they achieve that goal? And I actually think it's rooted in was one of the things that the process is most famously known for, and that is their veneration for the Nazis, the Aryan Brotherhood type activities amongst these cults, if you will. I think would be the organizing principle of why these people are everywhere. And I use this as an example right here. Let me pull this up. This is from the files of Maury Terry regarding the North Dakota investigation, right? So in the North Dakota investigation, what apparently came up amongst the folks, I believe it was it Phil Falcon? Let me see here. It was no, I think it was Falcon. Doesn't say here. I have to go back and look to see which one this is. One of Phil Falcon. Yeah. Apparently was into Odinism there in North Dakota. Yeah, so it says here in November 8th, 1979, letter to his mother, he mentioned his Odeon training, said that his brother thought he was insane, and said his late father spoke to him in a dream. He talked in detail about death and how it happened anytime, anyone. Odeon may refer to the Norse god Odin, god of death, war, art, and creator of the cosmos. So I think that's the underlying organizing principle between these organizations, and why the process people may, in fact, this may be why they are everywhere, because of this organizing principle of Odinism, or as the manifests within the process generally, as Marianne, I like to say she was the Marianne de Grimston was the reincarnation of what Goebbels, right?
Yes.
So there was a deep veneration within the process, right? Within this Nazi Nazi theology, right? So I think that's what the organizing principle is. I think Maury Terry picked up on it in North Dakota with the Odinism angle. And I think, other it's this kind of concept is manifest in other things such as glitch is on top of it here with Richard Allen. So there's a
Same.
deep Odinism situation going on in Indiana. Like it's
Same.
it's deep. It's not 1, 2, or 3 parties. It's deep within the political structure.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
I agree. I'm glad that he brought that up because I feel the exact same way. Free Richard Allen. That was a complete travesty. And also I think that the Nazi angle tracks with, the underlying, like the actual root theology. If you just wipe out all of the fluff, what does the process say? Humanity is the devil. They want to live forever, and they want to accomplish that through transhumanism. So yes, it is this Nazi ideology where like transhumanism is the goal, whether you want to call it like the process ARG, World of Warcraft simulation, William Sims Bainbridge, whatever. But when you look at a lot of their parents and their grandparents are a part of this sort of, in the 40s when, the Americans and the Nazis are kind of coming together in perfect harmony and really establishing their power around the time of like, these Rockefeller hearings right after World War II, where they're like, oh, well, we kind of screwed that up with the war. So we got to tighten it up and not tell the public so much, and make all of these NGOs, right? Because that is a part of the power structure, is these NGOs and this money laundering. That's the goal, is humanity is the devil. I'm not saying that as like a woo-woo Satanism angle. It's they want to live forever, like digitally. There's a whole book about Marianne de Grimston reincarnating in a digital Camelot. Like
exactly.
this is what these people think that they're gonna do.
Exactly. Yeah, they do. They definitely have, it's I think that's part of the whole with the whole the genderless, transgender thing, especially supported by the satanic branch, the satanic temple, that is. I think that's deeply rooted in the same concept of transhumanism. If you erase gender, then what do you have? That's the mixing of man and machine and getting rid of gender. I think that's all part of the same mission.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got the Peter Thiels of the world that are funding, sort of the right wing of some of these factions because, I don't do politics. I think they're faking gay. However, Donald Trump has a lot of very high ranking whale Scientologists, they call them whales, who have been funding heavily into his campaign during this last little election cycle. That makes sense to me, right? Why wouldn't there be sort of transhumanist individuals that, I mean, am I saying that Peter Thiel is a part of the process? No, but I am saying that he does have the exact same ideology as the process.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, and I had no idea Governor Pritzker had a brother turned sister in Minnesota who's big into transhumanism. Wonder if that brother turned sister was also a client of Jeffrey Epstein's, much like Governor Pritzker.
That is a good question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And then that's a good point. It doesn't sound Nazi, sounds commie. It's strangely enough, it's both. So they venerate the Nazis, but if you read their professed theology, it is very commie. Like the whole Marxism, they have very Marxist values. Destroy the middle class, destroy
even
the
though they're
family.
elitist, right?
Right.
So it's, I don't know.
Well,
it's
that's
like
how they maintain power, right? They got to
yeah.
destroy the middle class. That way, you're eliminating the competition.
Yeah, it's a lot of relativism from these people. Like, I don't think that they ultimately believe in anything. I just think that they are like a death cult. That's what I think. They just want everybody to die. So,
well, that's a good point. That is what they say. They definitely hate humanity, and I believe them. Just watching an interaction from the outside looking in, watching somebody like Lucian number 2. He's not the first Lucian. Lucian number 2 / Doug, the head of the satanic branch / satanic temple. Just watching him interact, like, not only do I expect any organization to have a better front-facing public relations game than that dude has, that dude brings to the table, but like, he clearly does hate people. Like, it comes off in the way he communicates. He hates people. Like, he does hate humanity. It seems pretty clear to me, and just kind of like a third party witnessing his communications.
well, and we're starting to We're starting to see some of that fallout coming directly out of the temple through the Grey faction. There's
Sure.
people that have been a part of the temple that have been kind of at his, side from the beginning or since the early days that, it is turning into the cult of Lucian, the cult of Dougie, but
Oh, that's right.
there's also a lot of other darker things that have been reported at some of the other orgs of the temple. Because I recently learned that the Satanic Temple calls their different locations orgs. Isn't that
Come
fascinating?
on.
I swear.
Come on.
Yep. Isn't that fascinating?
That's ridiculous.
It makes sense though, right? If they're
It does,
Scientologists, yeah.
for sure. That brings to mind this question we actually had from Brand Nothing regarding this conversation here, and this I thought was a good point. Maybe something we can start maybe providing a summary on, because we get into some of these neo process aspects here. Because we looked at the corporate documents, and obviously there's that aspect, but then we were talking about the music aspect, which we've discussed in our previous conversations, and I know you've discussed there on your show and relative to these processing entails. But the focal point and figure really at the forefront of the neo process movement was Genesis P-Orridge. And when I saw this post, and actually I think it was originally posted back in February 2023, he just resent it to us here. I thought, well, that's actually a really good point. How did Genesis P-Orridge get wrapped up into this? And is he really like a connecting principle between the old faction and the new faction? Was he there for both factions, is what I'm saying. And this question kind of, it's a good question, at least to ask him, whether or not if he was involved with the children. Genesis P-Orridge was there in New York City, looking like a sketch from was this the Voskarician shooting? Is that what this sketch is from?
I believe it's from the Voskarician shooting, yeah.
So, and that one specifically had a very hit aspect to it as well, as far as targeted nature to it and whatnot, tracking the girl down and shooting her, and plenty of witnesses and whatnot. Multiple figures based upon the eyewitness accounts. This was one of the figures that was involved in the murder. And again, I mean, it's a good point, because Genesis P-Orridge, not only, I think that is a woman in the sketch, but he continued to play this genderless character. He later got breast implants, decided he was non-binary, I believe, was this, the forefront of, again, this erasing gender, right, situation. So he definitely had some very androgynous look to himself, a look of androgyny. There you go. So I could see where that younger Genesis P-Orridge could pass as that character in that sketch. I mean, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it certainly can't rule it out, and it really does beg the question: how did Genesis P-Orridge find himself in this role? Was he present for some of these earlier activities with the original process?
I mean, I don't think it can be ruled out. I think that a really unique case about the Son of Sam is, eyewitness testimony, eyewitness sketches are highly unreliable for numerous reasons. And that's why the Son of Sam is so unique, because David Berkowitz literally doesn't look like most of these sketches, which is really bizarre. You kind of have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to make it work. Let's just say, for argument's sake, hypothetically speaking, that was Genesis. Well, it's not only the transhumanist angle, but there were a lot of very serious accusations of, sexual predatory behavior, including against children. The process was not kind to their offspring, but also there are allegations, rumors, things of that sort, specifically against Genesis and some of her other peers, professionally and personally, that they were involved in activity that the children spoke about specifically, because a lot of those rumors did come from the children, the Untermeyer Park sort of, Westchester Yonkers cult, that was a huge part of it. But again, people got to remember, it didn't just come from there. It was also being heavily rumored, and Ed was involved in trying to obtain one of the tapes of such activity in California from Roman Polanski's house. So these things follow them. These sort of rumors of abuse of children on film maybe murder, maybe not. These things follow these people wherever they go. So I don't think that it's out of the question if that was Genesis, because I don't think that half of those sketches are David. I think that the one sketch that I pointed out, I think that that's DeMeo. I think that there's no question. I mean,
I think you're onto something.
DeMeo. Yeah.
I think you're onto something. Because DeMeo seems to play an interesting kind of third party surrounding a lot of these activities and a lot of these people involved in the Son of Sam saga. So
why wouldn't the mafia be involved?
Exactly. Well, why would the mafia not be involved? Why would the mafia not be running the Jesus faction of the Process Church today?
Exactly. Exactly. Because the Process had a lot of money back then.
Visiting David Berkowitz in prison, right?
Yeah. Well, literally, they just visited him a couple months ago, guys. Like, there's literally a sit down with a couple meatball wandering bishops. Like, you're going to go along with the line. But I mean, I was looking
not just any meatball wandering bishops, if I may interject there, is
yes.
A meatball wandering bishop who runs a Christian quote unquote nonprofit organization and whose father directly funded Process activities in Hollywood.
Correct.
Notably, the Deep Throat film, pornography, and the Process Theater, the Pussycat Theater.
Correct.
Yeah.
These are facts. It's
a pretty close nexus point, if you ask me.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I don't see why people would view these things separately. It doesn't. Why wouldn't they? It's all money laundering, right? And I mean, the mafia just got in a lot of trouble with that particular, the UN one that DeMeo ended up getting taken out over. And that was just because they humiliated Rosalind Carter. That was the whole reason why that thing kind of went to crap, because I think it was Eppolito, one of the street guys in DeMeo's crew, got a photo with Rosalind, and then Jimmy found out that it was the mafia, and that was when all of those hits started going down. So, we've got the timing. We've got weird stuff with Michael Thevis and Jimmy Carter and Andrew Young of the UN. Like, there's just a lot of weird crossover. And I think that it was the embarrassment of the Carter administration why some of that stuff had to go down. But I don't think that people should ignore that the Son of Sam crimes were running parallel to all of that. For sure. Yeah, it didn't happen in a bubble, not in a vacuum. These people, they all know each other. And they definitely have these seemingly disparate incidents in different cities don't seem so disparate once you start looking at the details, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good note to leave off on here. Dana, do you have any? I appreciate your time joining me here to kind of tackle this question of what is the process. I think we've effectively provided some context and understanding to that question. Happy to have you back for a future extension of the conversation here on the process. Always enjoy these conversations in your time. Do you have any closing thoughts for the folks of the interwebs? The process people are everywhere. To quote Ed Sanders, that's a great closing thought. I appreciate it. Well, hope folks enjoyed it. Seems like they did in the chat. And again, look forward, I guess, to more conversations in the future. But definitely, as I always recommend, I always tune into your shows on these subjects on your Rotting Jewels channel. I highly recommend your deep dives into these process and Scientology related topics, or the same organization, because again, it's probably a good time to start describing them as the same and stop delineating these two organizations as different. But I agree. On that note, thanks for your time, and we'll definitely talk about it in the future. Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, then check your six. Look in that garbage can, 'cause you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.